안녕하세요. 데이터브릭스 금융영업팀의 김준표입니다. 바쁘신 와중에도 데이터브릭스 금융 인더스트리 웨비나에 참석해 주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다. 오늘 세미나를 시작하기에 앞서 데이터브릭스 본사와 데이터브릭스 코리아 오피스의 주요 마일스톤을 간략하게 공유 드리고 시작할 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 우선 첫 번째로는 데이터브릭스 본사는 지난 12월 미국의 주요 투자사인 트라이브 인베스트먼트의 주도하에 미화 약 10빌리언 달러, 한화로 환산하면 14조 원의 시리즈 J 라운드의 투자를 유치를 했습니다. 이번 투자로 데이터브릭스의 시장 가치는 62빌리언 달러, 한화로 약 90조 원의 기업으로 성장을 하게 되었습니다. 데이터브릭스에서는 이 투자를 바탕으로 더욱더 공격적으로 AI 투자를 하고 다양한 또 많은 AI 인재들을 영입할 예정이 있고 또 데이터 인텔리전스 플랫폼에 대한 제품에 대한 투자를 더욱더 대폭 확대할 계획에 있습니다. 이러한 투자 그리고 시장에서의 관심은 데이터브릭스의 미래가 시장에서도 매우 긍정적으로 평가받고 있음을 보여주는 사례라고 생각이 됩니다. 두 번째로는 데이터브릭스 코리아 오피스에 대한 뉴스입니다. 데이터브릭스 코리아는 국내 금융시장 진출을 위해서 많은 투자와 노력을 기울였습니다. 그 결과로 2024년 금융보안원 CSP 안정성 평가를 파스 솔루션으로 성공적으로 완료를 했습니다. 이 데이터브릭스의 안정성 평가 결과는 금융보안원 CSP 안정성 평가 지원 포털에서 지금 바로 확인이 가능한 상태입니다. 이러한 평가를 통해서 국내 금융사들은 데이터브릭스를 조금 더 안전하게 그리고 더욱 유연하게 활용할 수 있다라고 좀 생각이 들고 또 더욱더 다양한 데이터의 활용 사례, 유스 케이스들을 데이터브릭스 솔루션에서 구현할 수 있게 되었다라고 생각을 하고 있습니다. 또한 데이터브릭스는 국내뿐만 아니라 글로벌에서도 다양한 금융사 고객들을 보유를 하고 있습니다. 리스크 매니지먼트, FDS, AML 등과 같은 금융권의 다양한 활용 사례, 유스 케이스를 고객사와 같이 수행을 하고 있으며 또 전통적인 레거시의 EDW, 빅데이터 플랫폼, 하도 플랫폼의 성공적인 마이그레이션을 같이 고객사와 수행을 하고 있습니다. 데이터브릭스는 이 데이터 인텔리전스 플랫폼을 통해 데이터 AI 시대에서 국내 금융 고객사들이 더욱더 많은 인사이트 그리고 경쟁력을 확보할 수 있다라고 생각을 하고 있습니다. 다시 한번 데이터브릭스에 대한 관심에 감사드리며 데이터브릭스 코리아의 금융영업팀은 여러분들이 데이터를 통해 경쟁력을 강화할 수 있도록 최상의 솔루션과 지원을 제공할 것을 약속드립니다. 제가 말씀드릴 내용은 여기까지이고요. 이제부터 저희가 준비한 웨비나를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Hello. So my name is Rob Byrne, Vice President Software Engineering, work in the R&D division of MasterCard Foundry based in the European Tech Hub in Dublin. So what I want to talk about today is we're quite new to Databricks in Foundry. So what we wanted to do was build a chatbot. So it's yet another application of RAG. So the MasterCard Assistant is just a working title. It's not something we're launching or anything like that. It's for internal use. We wanted to see if, for product onboarding, we could ultimately speed up time to revenue for customers onboarding with MasterCard. And that's going into market test next week. So hopefully we're going to learn if our business case is effectively a good one. So just a bit about Foundry. We're a cross-functional organization, global in nature. Our sole purpose is to de-risk new product development, but we do that through various pillars. So we have customer insights, which is essentially looking at emerging trends and customer insights. We've R&D discovery, where I live, and that's the kind of technology muscle of Foundry. So we do things like building out market tests. We go end to end. We have our own infrastructure and tooling stacks that we maintain. So we have our self-sufficiency and we can move fast and break things. We have the CX and design folks who effectively conduct things like customer research, market research to make sure that we're building the right solution for the right customer. And then new product development, that's where we can go building out MVPs, getting partner and customer feedback with a view then to those graduating to scale. And then the growth operating system is we build new processes and platforms that are ultimately shared across the org. So as part of our assistant, we learned early on that there was a lot of appetite for this capability. So it started out around product onboarding, but there's probably about 60 use cases, 60 product lines that would like to leverage this. So we decided that we'd come up with a domain-centric architecture. So by effectively teams bringing their documentation, their metadata, their Q&As, and their people, we can stand up a domain and they can use the front-end applications we've built to effectively operate that domain. It's all backed by Databricks. So Databricks is taking care of model and vector serving and also the lifecycle management of models and vectors. So just, I suppose, a little bit to double click on the architecture. So I've broken it into three there. So on the left is the data ingestion. So I'm sure most people here are familiar with RAG. So this is where we're taking in a growing multitude of document formats and metadata. We chunk them up and we store them in delta tables from Databricks, and then ultimately we use the vector indexing capability that's happening automatically as we populate our delta tables. We're using the foundation models to leverage embedding models that are there for us. That's on the kind of per token billing. And then over on the top right, this is where we have a human in the loop. So as questions are being asked and answers are being generated by the LLM, we capture those in a database and we put them through a review process with some humans. So the subject matter experts have the ability to effectively grade the answers, and they can also edit the answers. And we capture those edits so we can ultimately feed them back in to fine tuning or to use as a Q&A cache, which we also leverage vector search to drive that out. So we're dipping our toe right now into fine tuning. So we're leveraging the fine tuning API that's been recently launched. We haven't stood any fine tuned models up yet, but that's to come. And again, it's going to be a case of the economy of a fine tuned model versus a foundation model. So the journey from January to now. So essentially, we stood up a workspace via ClickOps, so we could start learning about the whole thing. Essentially, we needed to upskill our folks. We had a call with Andrew. I don't know if he's here, but we were kind of pleased to see the sense of urgency where Databricks were willing to kind of get boots on the ground and help us with a POC. So we had some folks in from Databricks. We completed the POC into early March, and the results of the POC were quite promising. So we did have the Mixtral model, which through manual grading was giving us around a 64% efficacy score. So to compute the efficacy, we came up with a rubric where we scored the answers from 1 to 5. Then we used Mistral and LLM as a judge. LLM as a judge was a little bit more optimistic. For people that don't know what that is, it's essentially using an LLM to judge the answer from another LLM and compare the answer to an expected answer. And then DBRX was just launched, so we decided we'd reevaluate with that, and we got another couple of basis points of a bump. So after the POC, we needed to kind of hunker down and kind of build out the MVP. So this is when we effectively plugged Databricks into our source control system, which is effectively Bitbucket. And we could turn the development then into a team sport. So effectively doing iterative development, feature branches, and merging back to develop. We then enabled the serverless features of Databricks. So this was foundation model, serving, and vector indexes. Prior to that, we were using open source models which were running in GPU-bound clusters. And then moving on, we effectively started to get ready for the push to production, or pilot production, I'll call it, where we started to use Databricks asset bundles, Databricks asset bundle templates. We enhanced our CI/CD pipelines to make them more aware of the Databricks CLI. And then we just came up with a very simple branching model to allow us to promote the RAG models up through the various environments. And then, all going well, we'll be turning things on next week, bringing people in from the first cohort of test users to start using this and give us feedback. And that's it from me.
Thanks, Rob. Next, we have Mohammed Hamidian, Senior Director, Advanced Analytics and AI with Manulife John Hancock, and Marcelo Granados, Industry Expert here at Databricks.
So we're super excited to have Mohammed here. Just as background, he is a Senior Director of Advanced Analytics and AI at John Hancock. He's also a physicist, which I think is pretty exciting. He spent time in labs at some of the most prestigious universities like Cornell and Harvard University. And we're very lucky to have him here with us today. Something else, so he's very humble. And what happened is that the solution he has been able to build on Databricks won the CEO award. I'm going to ask him just a couple of questions on, how did he build it? What were some of the challenges and other things? So first question for you, Mohammed. What are the trends that you're seeing in the insurance industry? And how does the vision that you have around AI fits into the broader mission and vision that John Hancock has as a company?
Great. Thanks, Marcella. So within the insurance industry, fintech, or not fintech, but financial services, has different levels of maturity. But one thing that you start to see is the expectations of the customer. They want to see a holistic solution from the companies they're interacting with. So when they call into one call center asking about one product that they bought from you, and then can I ask you about the other one? They're like, well, sorry, you got to call the other call center. I don't have your data here. That's important. And it's not just financial. I know a telecom company, I won't say which one, where I had a phone and I had home internet and they didn't talk to each other. So yeah. So the idea comes about of, well, how do you pull all of this together? Especially when you're in an industry that it's old, and so it's not born in the digital age. You're also having a lot of actors in there who are not digital themselves. So if you're selling insurance and you have an insurance agent who might have a file cabinet somewhere, to try to get them to interact with you digitally is challenging. And I'm going to talk about the long-term care space too, where as you get to the older customers, then it's also difficult to say, can you give me the data? Do you want to interact with us digitally? So to get to digital and to get to AI is actually a journey to transform your services. And I'm going to give you the fax example. Before fax, there was mail. So when people went to fax, you're like, I got digital. But not really, because there's still a guy in the fax room who's trying to type this stuff in. And then you took the fax and said, well, I'm going to create a website, and then you can upload your form to me. I'm like, okay, well, that's the next best thing. But then there's another person who takes your PDF and then has to enter the data. So these motions towards digitalness actually aren't always smooth, but you start to realize you can't access all the information that you need, and then you really need a proper digital solution. So for us, the enablement comes from the fact that the customers want a holistic view, and to serve them rapidly, quickly, you need that. And then the other part about it is, and I'll get into a little bit later, is you want to scale the interaction with your customers, and you can't scale if every 2 customers you add, you have to double the size of the people that you have at your company. So those are the things that as we build our strategy, the AI piece and putting the data together is going to help the sort of that customer-centric view.
Perfect, thank you. So tell us a little bit about the solution, the fraud solution for long-term care that you built.
Yeah, that's great. I'll give you a little bit of background on long-term care for those of you that may not have it. This is like insurance you buy in your 40s and 50s, such that once you get into your 70s, your 80s, and you're sick and you need someone to take care of you, you have an insurance. And there's a great New York Times article series to show you like the financial impact on people who don't have insurance or even that do of spending to take care of themselves in old age. So John Hancock, at the time of selling long-term care insurance, sold about 1 million policies. Currently, we have about 900 in force. At any given time, 40,000 people are on claim, meaning they want care, and you're paying out $2 billion a year in the care costs. And that number is going to grow over time, the number of people who are on claim. And then the industry metrics tell you there's about 3 to 5% fraud in this space. So you take $2 billion and then you grow it over time, and you say 3 to 5, that's an enormous amount of money. So the impact on the financials is pretty clear, but it's also an impact on the customer, because the more that we are paying for the bad actors, the more it impacts people's premiums, impacts re-rates, and so forth. So back in late 2022, there was an initiative that said, we got to tackle fraud, and from the executive level down, they went big. They said, we're going to put it down. We're going to enable new squads. And one of the squads enabled was the fraud analytics team, which didn't exist, and so we built it. And so at the time we said, okay, so what do you build to get you to a modern fraud detection technology? So as we were building the team, we said, well, one of the things that's going to be really important is to pull all the data that we have together. And remember, we're an old company. Admin systems, they have different data schemas, they have different representations. They don't even, well, I won't get into that. But you try to pull it together. So one of the things we came with is I think we need a proper data layer, and the knowledge graph, so graph databases and with semantics included, became a central requirement to build a fraud solution. And the idea was that this clean layer wasn't just going to enable the fraud analytics, but it was also going to enable the other squads that got set up. So now you have an experimentation team who's going to say, what are the new controls you can put into place? How much does it impact? We have document intelligence that got set up to say, well, now you want to start to interact with document intelligence, people submitting forms. We extract the data from it. Does it look consistent with the stuff they've submitted before? So that enabled us to say, this is the knowledge layer we need. And once we got all the data in there, actually, so just for people that don't know what a knowledge graph is, just quickly, the idea that every data point can be represented as an entity, and then you try to embed those relationships directly with other entities as relationships. And so you could do this via a SQL query, for example, right? And you would do like 7 joins to try to get to what you need, but you can directly embed it into the data. And so it both enables you to have a semantic representation, but then it also allows you to allow other people, like fraud investigators, to look at it and be like, I see the entire history of this claim in front of me. So that was particularly important. And then for long-term care, this is what our data model looks like. And at this point, this particular graph that we constructed has almost 200 million nodes in it and 300 million edges to represent the entire long-term care ecosystem within John Hancock. So by building this, we also then had to do one more thing, because as I said, when people started to enter this data into the admin systems long ago, no one said, well, do I have this record already? Should I enter a new record? And so we realized we had to do entity resolution. And I remember at the time, one person from IT said, don't do it. There are vendors out there that do it. It's a hard problem. And I bet him a beer. And we did it. And he owed me the beer last week, so it was great. But it was a situation where we had to really roll up our sleeves and create it. And I'll get to it in the architecture slide here, where to enable you to have hundreds of millions of records, to try to create a consolidated data layer, to do entity resolution. And we're doing it in a space where the back-end systems, the admin systems, don't properly track when things are changing. And so you can't just go back to the admin system and be like, which record changed, and I'll update my knowledge graph. We literally have to drop and recreate the graph on a daily basis, and it's a 10-hour load time. And so the Databricks piece actually is what gets you going there.
This is awesome. Thank you. I can't help but think about governance,
Yeah.
right? So, there's the shiny objects and the shiny things and UIs and graph analytics, but what was the process that you and your team had to go through when thinking about governance and lineage, not only of the data, but also on the assumptions, on the model itself? Yep. Walk us a little bit of just like from Data Python's perspective, like what were the data sources that you use from structure, unstructured? What were some of the challenges that you had on just like running that data all the way to insights, and how do you solve for those?
So we do have a pretty comprehensive governance structure at John Hancock Manulife. It's a little manual, but you do have a lot of discussions you have to have with legal and compliance and cybersecurity and operational risk and so forth. So there's a lot of new data sets that came in, and then obviously we had to go through them. And they wanted to understand what the data was being used for, and they want to see. So the construction of our data dictionary, showing how that data evolves, was something that we were managing through. Additionally, the governance initially when we set this up, I said this went all the way to the top, and so we were having discussions with C-suite people every 2 weeks. So it was a lot of high pressure, and they always wanted to know, what are you doing? How is it impacting you? So the governance was both from the point perspective: are you keeping track of the data? What data are you keeping track of? Are you only using it for fraud purposes? Because we set this up for fraud. Are you going to use it for marketing? The other piece of the governance, which I think once we got to model building, was that we were experimenting a lot, because you don't know with fraud what's going to stick. So you try 25 solutions, and one of those is going to give you the solution that says, oh, the detection rate is higher. But you don't know. So you're creating the model, you're sending the referrals to fraud investigators, and they're quickly going through it, and they're giving you feedback. But you need a catalog that says which model sent which referral to which fraud investigator, and what was the feedback that you got. And so there was a governance structure there too, to be able to have the metrics that you were tracking each of the models individually to get you to that.
Perfect. The other question that we have is Gen AI. Everybody's talking about it. I remember last year, exactly at this conference, that's when we had made the announcement of us acquiring Mosaic. And people were still a little bit skeptical, especially in regulated industries. So just like, what's the real value? Is this going to last? And if so, like, why would I go and just like overcomplicate my process for this? So for a company as big as John Hancock, with, great, smart people, what are the Gen AI use cases that, anything that you can share, right?
Sure.
Like what use cases do you guys actually have into production? And then part 2 of the question is, what are the other Gen AI high value use cases that are not into production yet?
Right.
And if so, like, what's stopping you from that?
So just like some of the previous speakers, the Gen AI use cases for call center, for example, long-term care products are complicated. And once again, they were created at a time when they were pieces of paper, and then someone scanned, and there was no necessarily structured data at the time. So there was a lot of work, and actually it's in this pilot mode that the call center can have within it now a chatbot to query the particular contract of the person who's calling in, because most people when they call in, they're like, what does my policy cover? And you have to be able to answer that pretty quickly. So that's something that's that my colleagues, some of them are here, help build as an initial use case. There is another use case in the life insurance side, is to optimize campaigns for selling life insurance. And the idea of just being able to have quickly access to the data, to have someone on their phone, a producer, say, hey, what is the current performance of my campaign? Who do I need to contact? And so forth. That's the use case that's also in flight right now. The initial version of it, sort of based on rules, is going, but the active development. The one piece on here for entity resolution, for example, because data obviously is dirty in some of these systems, we had to say, well, how do we match it against a clean data set? So for example, there are a lot of businesses in this particular data set where there are duplicates, but how do you know there are duplicates? And so we went back and said, okay, let's start with the transformers. Let's try to understand the transformer embeddings and then take our data, match it, let's say, to a Google data set or to a Dun & Bradstreet data set, and then try to construct the relationship. So then you start to create that much, much cleaner data set for your businesses. For document intelligence, where you're extracting data points from an image, there's a lot of blurriness and fuzziness. And so you almost need context to be able to fix that data. So one of the other use cases is if you're reading from a chart, let's say it's an invoice, and there's something that might be a little bit smudged out, but you don't want to contact the customer to do it, and you want to do this all in an automated way, is the context that you're giving to the large language model is able to infer what that smudge could have been based on some of the other data that's in the form or other forms that you had.
Perfect. I guess one other question, kind of like personal question. So from the time you were in labs experimenting to dealing with corporate America, what are some of the things that you find different? And like obviously like delivering on projects and like anything that you can share with just, I guess, like how long did it take you approximately to just do all of this experimentation, test all of these things, whether or not it's working, like how big was the team? And also, how do you get visibility all the way to your CEO to just pay attention to what you and your team were doing?
So I said, starting out as a physicist, I always try to stay technically involved, so I have a team. But the idea of experimentation is, we always find important because you can always do what the other person's doing, but then you're not going to do any better than what the other person's doing. So we have a bit of a culture to say, we're going to try something new. And we have a good agile methodology. Like data science and agile don't work together well all the time. But sometimes if you give a data scientist a box of time and you're like, this is how much time you have to learn something, it focuses the brain a little bit. And so that's been helpful. But then you take a step back and say, hey, I need a little bit more time to do it. And you do it. So we have to be pretty nimble. You can't stick to that strict, which is very different than physics, where you come in, you're like, I'll see you in 5 years with my thesis. And you definitely can't do that. So I learned that very quickly as I transitioned to industry. And then the visibility up to the CEO. So the award we won was actually an external award by an industry watchdog who was looking at various things. And then it got back to the CEO, we won this, and he was extremely excited. I think I have to give credit to the people at the top who said, we're going to double down and we're going to give the team the resources it needs to do this work. It's not this, well, we'll give you a little bit, we'll see what happens in 3 months and so forth. I think the people who convinced them said, put together a bunch of smart people, give them the resources and go. And then we delivered. And then therefore his investment came back as like, oh, I made a good investment. So I think those are particularly important. And I would say what's transformed since then is that there's a lot of transformation and technology happening in long-term care insurance in our company. And advanced analytics now sits at the table for strategic decision-making, because it's pretty critical that you can't, it's not all a business decision. There's a lot of input you need from the data scientists, the data engineers, who can say what is possible, and to try to stretch people to say, that can be automated. This is going to be really hard to automate. Maybe we'll do it in a different way. So all that together, I think we built a lot of credibility, and sometimes it takes in increments, but as you build credibility, you'll get a seat at the table.
Okay, well, perfect. Thank you, Mohammed.
안녕하세요. 저는 데이터브릭스의 금융영업팀에서 근무하고 있는 민경호라고 합니다. 웨비나는 잘 들으셨는지 모르겠습니다. 오늘 들으셨던 웨비나를 좀 정리드리고 저희들의 데이터브릭스를 활용해서 금융기관에서 사용할 수 있는 사례에 대해서도 간단히 설명을 좀 드리고 오늘 웨비나를 클로징하기 위해서 나왔습니다. 오늘 많은 분들께서 참석을 해주셔서 굉장히 좋은 것 같습니다. 은행, 홍보, 생보, 카드 결제, 핀테크 등 그 다양한 분야에서 오시는데요. 오늘 사례가 자신의 분야에 어떻게 잘 맞는지에 대해서 판단을 하시는 것도 좋습니다만, 어떻게 하면 데이터브릭스를 가지고 어떤 일들을 할 수 있을까라고 상상을 해주시면 좋을 것 같고요. 오늘 내용을 좀 힌트로 해서 또 추가적인 세션들을 저희들이 요청을 해주시면은 그것으로 오늘 웨비나가 좀 성공적이었다고 말씀드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그럼 오늘 나왔던 이야기들을 살짝 정리 한번 드리고 어떠한 케이스들을 만들어낼 수 있을지에 대해서도 간단히 좀 이야기를 나눌 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 두 가지 사례를 보셨습니다. 마스터카드와 매뉴라이프 사례를 두 가지를 보셨는데요. 사실 마스터카드 같은 경우에서는 AI 관련된 비즈니스 모델을 만드시면서 저희 데이터브릭스를 사용한 사례라고 말씀을 드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 사실 AI를 비즈니스화하는 과정 혹은 AI를 활용하는 과정에 대해서 여러 가지 카테고라이징이 있을 수 있습니다만 저는 이 네 가지 단계들을 인용을 하는 것을 좋아합니다. 우리가 오픈되어 있는 그런 AI 모델들을 프롬프트 엔지니어링을 통해서 활용을 하는 케이스. 좀 더 나아가서는 우리들의 데이터셋을 가지고 어느 정도 학습을 시켜서 우리의 목적에 맞게 활용을 하기 위한 노력을 하는 그 레그 단계들. 그리고 이것들을 정말 우리들의 도메인 지식에 맞게 튜닝을 하기 위해서 정말 여러 가지 모델들을 이용을 해서 할루시네이션을 없앤다든지 하는 그런 파인 튜닝 단계가 있을 수 있고요. 실질적으로 정말 이런 우리들만의 파운데이션 모델들을 만들어 나가는 이런 단계가 있다고 저는 생각을 하고 있습니다. 오늘 여러 가지 이야기가 나왔습니다만 사실상은 국내에서는 이런 AI 모델 활용에 대해서 이게 파운데이션 모델까지 가는 케이스들은 저는 많이 보지는 못했습니다. 실질적으로 비단 금융기관뿐만 아니라 그 범위를 국내에 있는 기업들로 확장을 하더라도 굉장히 드문 케이스라고 보고 있고요. 국내에 있는 금융고객분들께서는 느 정도 그래도 프롬프트 엔지니어링이라든지 또 어느 정도 혁신 업무 서비스를 신청을 하셔서 관련된 프롬프트 엔지니어링을 통해 자신들만의 어떤 AI 활용 모델들을 만들어 나가거나 비즈니스 모델들을 만들어 나가고 계시는 것 같습니다. 오늘 들으셨던 마스터카드 같은 경우에는 데이터브릭스의 여러 가지 기능들을 활용을 해서 어느 정도 본인들의 도메인 너리지 혹은 자신의 비즈니스 모델에 맞는 AI를 닦아나가는 그런 단계까지 와 있다고 저는 생각을 하고 있고요. 사실 이런 것들의 기반은 데이터들을 우리가 학습시키고자 하는 데이터들을 어떻게 추출할 것인지 갖다 놓고 이것들을 어떻게 통합 관리할 것이고 혹은 이거를 데이터 레이크 아키텍처를 통해서 다 담아놓은 상태에서 시작을 해야 된다라는 것들 그리고 이런 것들을 앞서 말씀드렸던 것처럼 내가 이 모델이 정말 잘못된 답을 던지고 있는 건 아닌가? 혹은 이런 것들을 검증을 하기 위해서 여러 LLM 모델을 활용하거나 혹은 스코링 방법론을 사용하는 것들 이런 것들에 있어서 다양한 활용 협업 부분들이 필요합니다. 그런 데이터 사이언티스트 분들은 데이터 엔지니어링 하시는 분들과 함께 협업을 해야 되는 것이고 그것들을 받아와서 서로 검증하는 내용들이 꼭 필요한데 이런 것들을 데이터브릭스가 도와주기 때문에 빠르게 자신들의 AI 제품들을 런칭할 수 있었다라는 게 오늘 마스터 카드의 이야기였고요. 사실 오늘 두 번째 사례는 매뉴라이프라고 하는 생명보험사 사례였습니다. 사실 데이터브릭스가 제공하는 가치는 굉장히 유사합니다. 데이터 파이프라인들을 정렬을 해서 이렇게 데이터 레이크라고 하는 컨셉으로 가게 되고, 그리고 이것들을 더 잘 학습하기 위한 거버넌스 관리를 해야 되는 거. 특히 오늘 거버넌스 관리에 대한 질문들이 좀 상세하게 좀 나왔었죠. 그만큼 우리가 얼마나 복잡한 모델들을 더 만들고 만드느냐에 따라서 거버넌스 관리가 굉장히 어렵습니다. 어디에 어떤 데이터가 있고, 이걸 누가 접근할 수 있고, 그런 것들을 어떻게 관리를 할 것인가, 이런 것들에 대해서도 굉장히 중요한 부분들이 있는데요. 이런 것들을 저희는 이제 유니티 카탈로그라고 하는 제품을 통해서 사용을 해서 관리를 하고 있다는 것. 그리고 저희가 또 안에 내재되어 있는 펑션들 중에서 머신러닝 모델을 관리하고 있는 것들이 굉장히 고도화됐다라는 것. 이런 것들이 굉장히 중요한데요. 사실상 생보사에서 이 부정 방지를 한다라는 건 굉장히 중요한 내용일 수 있습니다. 비단 생보사뿐만 아니라 신보사 같은 경우에서도 최근에 국내 같은 경우에서는 IFRS 17이 좀 도입이 되면서 어쨌든 손해율을 잡든지 해지율을 잡으시든지 이것들을 이제 과거 데이터를 기반으로 해서 그것들 계속 측정을 한 다음에 지금 손익을 내고 계실 텐데 사실상 이런 것들이 이제 점점점 데이터가 쌓여가면서 이제 점점점 예측 가능한 시대가 또 올 것입니다. 그러면 우리는 정말 정확한 수익 인식을 하고 있는지 이런 것들에 대해서도 계속 챌린지가 어디선가 내부가 됐든 외부가 됐든 있을 텐데 이럴 때 이런 프로드 방지 모델들 혹은 이런 유를 계산하고 예측하는 모델들 이런 것들이 굉장히 모든 것들이 사실 연관되어 있잖아요. 그래서 점점점 데이터가 굉장히 중요해지고 있다라고 저는 말씀을 좀 드릴 수 있을 것 같고요. 오늘 제가 좀 이런 이야기를 드리기 위해서 저희 데이터브릭스에서 금융기관 고객분들께서 어떤 유즈 케이스를 주로 많이 사용할까라는 부분들을 좀 조사를 해봤습니다. 그래서 이런 보이시는 것과 같은 차트가 나왔는데요. 제가 이 차트를 보면서 좀 사실 느낀 점은, 이제는 이제 데이터나 AI 같은 내용들이 더 이상 우리의 오퍼레이션들을 더 잘할 수 있도록 도와주고, 뭐, 우리들의 기획팀이라든지, 우리들의 재무팀이라든지, 이런, 본부 레벨에서 활용할 수 있는 그런 것들이 아니라요. 실질적으로 우리들의 영업이, 우리들의 매출에게 직접적인 영향을 주고 있구나라는 생각을 많이 했습니다. 그만큼 데이터를 잘 관리하고, 데이터를 더 현대화하고 더 잘 운용할 수 있는 능력이 굉장히 기업들의 성과에 많은 영향을 미치고 있다는 것을 말씀을 드릴 수 있었는데요. 사실 가장 많은 금융기관 고객분들께서 저희 데이터베이스를 사용하는 유즈 케이스는 1위는 사실 리스크 관리였습니다. 사실 이 부분도 들어보시면 아실 것이 저희가 굉장히 많은 리스크 관련된 규제를 받고 있고 많은 보고서를 쓰고 있는 것으로 저는 알고 있고요. 예를 들면 오늘 이제 은행 여러분들 오셨다고 했었는데 은행 같은 경우에도 바젤세리 기반으로 여러 가지 지표들을 관리를 하고 계실 겁니다. 뭐 그 안에는 뭐 거액 익스포저도 있으실 거고 유동성 관리도 있으실 거고 그 안에 들어있는 여러 가지 함수들 중에서 그 개인의 여러 가지 신용 모델들 이런 것들이 다 들어가 있고 위험 모델들이 들어가 있으실 텐데 이런 것들을 측정하는 것뿐만 아니라서도 어, 비단 은행뿐만이 아니죠. 은행이 가장 많은 규제를 받고 있는 기관 중 하나지만, 뭐, 손보, 행보, 카드, 캐피탈, 자산운용, 투자, 증권 등등 여러 가지 분야에서 저희가 여러 가지 리스크 관리가 필요한데, 이런 부분들을 데이터가 좀 쉽고 좀 잘 예측할 수 있게 도와드리고 있다는 게 사실 많은 부분들을 지금 차지를 하고 있고요. 또 투자 분석 부분에서도 굉장히 중요한 부분들이 있습니다. 그래서 우리가 어, 뭐 국내 해외 채권들을 관리를 해야겠다라고 한다고 하더라도 지금까지는 어떠한 신용평가 기관에서의 신용평가 모델들을 그냥 갖고 와서 평점들을 내겠다면 이 자체적으로 우리가 판단할 수 있는 것들 그리고 그때 생기는 실시간 이벤트를 우리 평가 모델에 반영하는 이슈들 실제로도 국내에서는 이런 것들을 파일럿 형태로 진행하고 있는 사례들도 있는데 이런 것들이 어떻게 보면 투자 분석 안에 들어가서 우리의 매출액을 늘리고 우리의 영업이익을 개선하고 이런 측면으로 좀 나아가고 있다는 걸 볼 수 있고요. 사실 제가 약간 의외였던 부분들은 초개인화가 생각보다 많지 않았다. 그래도 3이죠. 부분이 있는데, 이제는 더 이상 뭐 기존에 있었던 데이터들을 분석을 해서 마케팅을 하는 그런 시대는 이제 거의 지나가고 있죠. 이제는 정말 실시간 초개인화 마케팅 시대가 되어가고 있는 것은 여러분 잘 아실 겁니다. 한 번쯤 이미 카드사에 계신 분들, 핀테크에 계신 분들 다 아시겠지만, 내가 어디서 대출 비교해봤더니 갑자기 어디선가, 저희 쪽에서 한번 대출 알아보시겠어요? 이런 메시지 받아봤던 분들이라든지, 어떤 지역에 가서 내가 카드 결제를 했는데, 그 지역에 맞는 마케팅 푸시 메시지가 날라왔다든지, 이미 이런 거는 굉장히 업계에서 표준적인 어, 데이터 분석 모델이 되어가고 있고, 데이터 분석을 통한 마케팅 모델이 되어가고 있는 것입니다. 그래서 어떤 이벤트를 가지고 어떤 소구를 갖고 있는 메시지를 고객에 던질 거냐. 그리고 또한 제품적인 측면에 있어서도 우리가 얼마나 더 고객에게 맞춰가는 위에 이제 언더라이팅 부분도 있지만 정말 우리가 담보들을 보험 설계하실 때 담보들을 굉장히 고객한테 맞게 설정을 해서 우리가 얼마나 경쟁력 있는 가격을 던질 수 있느냐 이런 것들은 굉장히 사실은 중요한 부분들이죠. 굉장히 중요한 부분들이 되어가고 있고 어, 네 번째로 나온 게 이제 아까 매뉴얼 라이프 사이클에서 보셨던 이제 부정방비죠. 이런 것들이 다 굉장히 저희들 영업이익이나 이런 데 영향을 미치고 있기 때문에 그리고 또 은행 같은 데 바로 가게 되면 자금 세탁 방대 같은 것들 이런 부분에 있어서도 네, 데이터가 많이 활용되고 있고 데이터브릭스가 굉장히 많은 기여들을 하고 있다 하는 정도로 말씀드릴 수 있을 것 같고요. 실질적인 사례 같은 것들은 저희들 상담 신청 혹은 저희를 남겨주시면은 저희들이 연락드렸을 때 관련된 내용도 궁금하다라고 남겨주시면은 제가 충분히 팔로업 드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 네, 데이터브릭스 코리아 오피스 같은 경우에서는 굉장히 다수의 영업 사원들 분들과 서포트 엔지니어 분들, 여러분들 지원해 드릴 수 있는 프리세일즈 엔지니어 분들까지도 모두 다 보유를 하고 있는 기업이고요. 실제로 2024년에 저희가 금융보험은 CSP 안정성 평가를 파스 업무범위로 받게 되었습니다. 그래서 어, 파스 업무범위라는 것은 여러분들이 혁신 업무 서비스를 신청하지 않으셔도 사용해 볼 수 있다라는 문이 있고요. 이거에 대해서는 자세하게 저희 또 연락 주시면은 관련해서 상담 드릴 수 있도록 하겠고, 저희가 이런 안전성 평가를 기반으로 해서 올해 1분기까지 또 프로모션도 진행을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 무료 아키텍처 진단이라든지 비용 절감이나 기능 구현 같은 것들을 해보실 수 있는, POC를 해보실 수 있는 그런 트라이얼도 저희가 한 달 이상씩 드리고 있기 때문에 이 단기간에 꼭 상담 신청 주시면은 그 관련된 내용들 저희가 짧게라도 한번 전달해 드릴 수 있는 시간을 가질 수 있으면 굉장히 좋겠습니다. 언제든지 여기 있는 연락처 주시고요. 저희가 또 흥미 있었다라고 또 남겨주시면은 또 연락을 또 드리고 있기 때문에 그런 것들 알려주시면 충분히 다 팔로우 할 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 웨비나 콘텐츠 좋으셨는지 잘 모르겠습니다. 이제 새해가 시작이 됐죠. 많은 계획들 있으실 것 같은데, 저희 데이터브릭스가 이 데이터 쪽이라든지 AI 쪽이라든지 많은 지원해드릴 수 있으면 좀 좋을 것 같습니다. 오늘 귀한 시간 내주셔서 굉장히 감사드리고요. 함께 해주셔서 감사합니다.